If you ever make videos for YouTube, whatever you do, don't make a series like My Camino week by week. At first, it seemed quite a good idea. I had plenty of video recordings left over from the Camino. I wouldn't have to do any research. And a couple of people even left comments asking me to do some videos like this. But the problem is, it took me 30 days to walk the Camino, but to make this video series, My Camino week by week, has taken me 3 bloody months, and I'm getting a bit fed up with it. But you can't stop. If you set people's expectations, you know, week by week, you can't just do the first 2 or 3 weeks and then stop. So we have to keep going now. And if you've been watching these videos from the beginning, you must be just as tired and fed up as I am. So ironically, My Camino week by week series is turning into a metaphor for the Camino. Towards the end, you get bored and fed up, but you just have to keep going just for this one last week, and it will all be done. Well, it's Tuesday morning. I'm in Santiago. I got here on Saturday afternoon, which means my leg muscles are just about relaxed enough now so I can sleep more easily. The story so far is the beginning of week 4, and I've just got 9 more days to go until I get to Santiago. But the tiredness and fatigue are starting to catch up with me. The soles of my feet have become quite numb, except for this strange tingling sensation, and the muscles in my legs have become very tense. Also, I can feel the tendons pulling at the back when I'm walking, which makes me limp a bit, as you can see in this video. At night time, having tense, stiff legs makes it quite difficult to sleep. So although I go to bed at the same time as everyone else, you know, lights off at 10 o'clock, I lie there for about an hour, and if I haven't gone to sleep by that time, I tended to get up, take my rucksack, go and sit in a communal part of the albergue, eat my bread and cheese, read something on my phone or go online. One night the albergue owner found me and he let me sleep on the sofa in the dining room. And in fact, being in the dormitories, I'm finding that more difficult as the Camino progresses. The first night wasn't too bad, apart from a bit of snoring, it was fine. But over the days and weeks, I become less inclined to share the dormitories of other people. You know, you're always aware that there are other people around. So I could have stayed in a Casa Rural a couple of nights a week, had my own room, own bathroom, own electricity charging point, which would be a great luxury, somewhere to put my glasses. But to me, being on the Camino, you had to sleep in the dormitories and suffer that experience, so I put up with it. Although I am now eating on my own more often in the evenings in the bars. I prefer to go for an extra €5 or so. You get a much better meal. And the communal meals are okay, but there's only so much you can put up with the difficult conversations with people whose English isn't their first language, so it's quite nice to have a bit of a break and eat in the bars. To try and give my feet and legs a bit of a rest, I do a few days walking 20 or 25 kilometres instead of the usual 30. And in fact, by now, but just by walking a little bit further each day over the previous 2 weeks, I very rarely see anyone from week 1 now, although I think they're probably just 1 or 2 days behind. The funny thing is, although I'm very fatigued, I've still got lots of energy, and because walking is a low intensity activity, your heart rate never goes up that much unless you're walking up a steep hill, so you've still got lots of energy. So I got in the habit of, for the first hour or 2 in the morning, while it's still dark and cool, I'd march at a good speed, you know, maybe 6 kilometres an hour or something like that. And going up hills, I'd march up as fast as I could and run down the hills. And that was just enough to raise your heart rate and to feel you've used some energy up. This day my walking companion was furry and had 4 legs, and really it was just a rerun of the coughing man incident. I tried not to help, I gave in and helped. I took the cat to a place of safety, But I thought afterwards, you know, I could have done a bit more. I could have bought it some food, or I could have given some money to the barmaid to look after it until it found somebody else to annoy. Day 25, I met up with a man who I'd met about a week before. We were both looking at our guidebooks about the same place. We started walking together. It's just after Othabera now, so we're into Galicia when we get near the end. Physically we were quite similar, you know, similar age, similar size. We marched along together at a good speed, so that was okay. But apart from that, we were completely different. I'm going to refer to him as the astronaut. He wasn't an astronaut, but he was highly qualified in his profession, which is one of the most respected professions in the world. He had a beautiful family who were all accomplished in their own areas of expertise. When he was younger, like a lot of people, he had a hobby, but he practiced his hobby at an international standard. So can you imagine what sort of person he was? He's very positive. If you bumped into him and you didn't know, you would think he was an astronaut. You know, he had all that right positivity and very capable. So we walked along together, and I realised what the coughing man must have felt. Because if there's two of you, if one of you sort of like the top one, it can be a bit oppressive to the other one, and you sort of go to sleep a bit, because whenever we looked at our guidebooks, he always worked out where we were first and knew where we should be going to. So it's quite easy to go to sleep. So we walked along together, but unlike me, he was very generous in his help and good-hearted. So he did everything properly. You know, if Seneca had been there, he would have really approved. Was that any better? No, that was bloody awful as well. So I think the moral of this story is, if you're a grumpy 50-year-old man, it's best just to walk on your own. So I stayed with the astronaut in a Casa Rural for one night, and that was nice. You know, only 2 people in the room, much less snoring. Then the next day, we decided to go to a monastery at Samnos. It's a great palace of a thing. You have to go off the Camino, but it's an official alternative Camino route, so it has its own set of yellow arrows, and it's in the guidebook. They have their website, and every day they have something like, I don't know, 4 or 6 guided tours. The guided tours are in English and Spanish. They're quite good. You have to pay to go around, but it's only a very small amount of money. They have some great murals there, and it's a great palace of a monastery. And do you know how many monks are based there? This great palace, there are only 9 monks for the whole place, so it's plenty of space if you want to go and be a monk there. On their website, the monks have something about their philosophy for receiving guests, and this is what it says. Saint Benedict tells his monks that the guests who come to the monastery must be welcomed as Christ, since he said, "I was a guest and you hosted me," and it teaches us that we must put the greatest care into receiving the poor and pilgrims, because in them Christ is more specially received. So that sounds very good, but the only time I remember seeing a monk at the monastery was standing behind the cash register in the gift shop, and he was talking to a young woman. He was trying to sell her a ticket for the next tour. She wanted to use the toilet, but he didn't understand, so I asked him in Spanish, "Donde están los servicios?" And he said, "You have to go out of the monastery and they're on the right hand side." So I told the woman that, and then he said, "They're on the right hand side, 80 meters up the road." So I said that again, translated that into English for the woman, and I was feeling quite good now. I thought, my Spanish is really coming in useful today. And she looked a bit disappointed. So anyway, I'd done my bit, so I went and stood by the door and waited for my astronaut friend to finish going around the gift shop. I thought afterwards, I think we'd done the 11:30 tour, and she was waiting to do the 12:30 tour. If she'd have gone to the toilet, she would have missed the 12:30 tour, and there wasn't going to be another tour until I think it's 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the afternoon. So she would have walked off the Camino for quite a long way to see the monastery. She wouldn't have been able to wait around 4 hours. If you walk in the Camino, you haven't got time, unless she was going to stay in the albergue there. So I thought, well, if she was a man, she probably would have had a wee behind a tree on the way to the monastery. Being a woman, she probably thought, I'll wait till I get to the monastery and I'll use the toilets there, and it'll be much easier. And I thought, well, you know, she should have been a bit more prepared. if you walk in the Camino, you're living outdoors for 30 days or so. So you're bound to need to go to the toilet sometimes. And I thought, I even made a video about it. Why didn't she watch that? Why didn't she do any research? But then I thought about the way other people receive pilgrims along the Camino, about the albergues that have water and fruit when you arrive, the local Spanish people who enthusiastically help you if you get lost, or help any pilgrim who's got themselves into trouble. I didn't see that at the monastery. I just saw the monk standing behind the cash register in the gift shop. You know, if Jesus had arrived and wanted to use the toilet, do you think they would have let him? I think they would have done. So us pilgrims, you know, Christ is especially received when they receive us. And in fact, anyone running a destination on the Camino for pilgrims, they're effectively running a reception centre for tired and vulnerable people. So having a toilet, having water, it's not a bad thing to do. Fruit, give us something to eat. But then I thought, not only are the monks there was the tour guide, and she spoke good English. So if she'd have been there, she could have helped, couldn't she? Or the monks could learn to speak English. Do you know what I'm doing? I'm getting a bit cross because I'm holding other people's faults in front of my eyes, but I'm keeping my own faults behind my back. The only thing I'm interested in is what I do, never mind what everyone else does. So I, again, like the coughing man or Camino cat, I could have done a bit more, couldn't I? I could have asked the woman what the problem was. I could have taken a few minutes to think. I could have said a bit more to the monk. I could have gone and found the woman who's the tour guide. If I'd have read the website before, I could have said to the monk, you know, us pilgrims, we're like Christ. You'd have let Christ use the toilet, so why not us? It goes to show you have to get your thoughts straight, because you only have a few moments to decide what to do. There's no point thinking about it afterwards, so you have to be ready for any incident that might happen. So I went and stood by the door and waited for the astronaut to finish going around the gift shop. What's strange was, he took the Camino really seriously, and he'd bought a ring with a Camino symbol on it. He bought a sign to put outside his house, the Camino sign. He brought all sorts of other mementos, and he had a leather bracelet with a Camino emblem on. Well, I thought, compared to all his other great achievements, just walking for a month seems quite straightforward. And to me, I'd be much more proud of his profession. You know, have a ring for your profession or something like that. But to him, and I suppose for other people, you know, the Camino is this great thing. I didn't get that same emotional, profound experience. I had my spiritual experiences and things I learned and things I know I need to carry on, like helping people and doing it properly. But for me, the Camino wasn't a long walk, but at the same time, it wasn't a life-changing experience. So if you remember, in the past, I've cycled around Europe, and that seemed to me the same sort of an adventure. You see some new places, you meet some people, you come back with some stories. The one advantage of sleeping in a tent is there's no snoring, and on a bicycle you can travel quite easily between 100 and 150 kilometers a day, rather than the 25 to 30 kilometers a day. So that was our trip to the monastery. Then me and the astronaut, we shared a Casa Rural room again, a second night. But again, by that time, we were ready to go our own way. But again, the astronaut, doing it properly, he didn't get grumpy. He said, shall we walk tomorrow? Shall we walk by ourselves tomorrow? So we did it all properly. Well done him. But still, it's better to walk on your own, I think. So the next day, I set off on my own, and now I'm in Sarria. When you get to Sarria, something changes. It becomes much busier. I think something like half of all the pilgrims walking the Camino start off at Sarria. The last 100 kilometers, so it's the shortest distance you can walk and still qualify for your certificate. When you get to Sarria, lots of people join. They're in groups, so they're quite happy to chat to themselves. They're not so vulnerable, and also they're not so tired. If you remember, it took us at the beginning of the Camino, it took us about a week before we all started saying "buen Camino" to each other regularly. From Syria, you hear "buen Camino" much less often. I tried to say it to people, but in the end I just gave up because no one was saying it back to me. The Spanish people I met are very friendly. I had lots of conversations with people in Spanish, very basic Spanish, and you speak to them as long as you can, and when you get a bit stuck, or if you say the wrong thing, they correct you in perfect English, and then you try and go back to the Spanish again and keep going. So it's all very sociable and very nice, but it's very busy, and the Camino experience changes also because you're getting so near the end. Really, you stop thinking about the pilgrimage aspects. You think about getting home, getting to Santiago. You know, you've had your Camino experiences, you've sat through all the communal meals you want to sit through. On the last night when I was walking, I saw a young man sitting on his own in a bar eating. I was in that bar eating as well. If it had been anywhere else in the Camino, the bar staff would have sat us together because they would expect one pilgrim to be a friend to another. But this is like the last night. I couldn't be bothered to get up and go and talk to him or go and sit with him or eat together. So I ate my meal on my own. That was the last night. Because the route from Syria is so busy, some guidebooks recommend doing the last 100 kilometres from Lugo. And in fact, there's a train that leaves from Syria to Lugo. I think it's about once an hour, and it's about a 30-minute journey, and it's not that expensive. But it's on the Camino Primitivo, I think, and it's quite hard work. It's very hilly, so if you're physically fit and strong and you don't want to be in crowds of people, you can get the train to Lugo. Although it's cheating a bit, isn't it? You know, if you walk all the way from St Jean Pied de Port all the way to Santiago, to get a train halfway through, there's cheating a bit. But if you're desperate to avoid the crowds, then that's something you can do. I'm nearly in Santiago now, but I've just got one more story before I get there. I stayed at one albergue which had a very complicated process for having a shower. When you arrive, you got a token, and when you wanted to have a shower, you put your token in this little mechanism outside of the shower. You went in, you had 2 minutes to take your clothes off, and the shower started with the hot water. And this is all carefully explained to you in Spanish, very basic Spanish, but it was explained in Spanish. It all works fine. The trouble is, I think there are only about 5 people staying in the albergue, and there were 2 or 3 women who hadn't really understood what the instructions were because they were in Spanish. So they put the token in, they quickly rushed into the shower, took their clothes off, waited. No water comes out because you have to wait 2 minutes, which is a long time if you're waiting for a shower. So they wrapped their towels around themselves, came out to look at the mechanism. Now, if you watch those boring old videos people make about packing lists, everyone prides themselves on having very small towels. Well, if you're a woman and you're planning to wrap your towel around yourself, it needs to be a minimum size if you're going to maintain any dignity. So anyway, I was there helping, and I was explaining, you have to wait 2 minutes, and I was pointing at the countdown timer so they could see 2 minutes, and there was instructions in Spanish, so I was pointing those out. And I wasn't looking at the women, I was being very respectful. And in fact, at one time I said, don't worry, men and women are all the same on the Camino. And I really meant it, and I said it with a straight face, because after my philosophical epiphany with the 5 glamorous Irish women, I realised this was all okay. And then later on I met one of the women I'd helped, and we had dinner together, and it was all fine. She was sort of a young adventurous mum, and she'd been walking the Camino del Norte, but it was very quiet in September and October. It was so quiet, some nights she was the only person staying in the albergue. So she'd moved down to the Camino Frances, and being an adventurous mum, she wanted to talk to people and to meet people. So I told her my story about the 5 glamorous Irish women, and in fact I told, after it happened, I told everyone about my experience, because it's either that or talk about how heavy your rucksack is or how sore your feet are. So it made a nice change. Gone were the days of Granion, when asked if we wanted to discuss spiritual things, we didn't know what to say or how to say it. Now I had a story to tell, and I was going to tell it. She thought this was a great story, and we had dinner together, and It's quite easy to say men and women are the same on the Camino, but the dynamic between a man and a woman having dinner together is completely different to two men. So sometimes I tell this story and I say men and women are the same, and sometimes I tell this story and I say men and women are different, and there's always a romantic aspect there. So you're thinking, which is it? I don't know. That's a short answer. And I expect after this time I never will. But if you're going to do the Camino, you'll probably come to your own ideas anyway, or if you've done the Camino, you'll have your own opinion. So I finally arrived at Santiago on day 30. I got to a small albergue. They said we've got one bed left, which they say a lot on the Camino. I don't know whether that's just me or whether that's just something they say. So they said we've got one bed left, and they seemed to think I'd be with other people. I said, oh, that's okay, I'm on my own. And they said, well, don't worry, we've got a key. So although we lock the door at 10, you can go off with your Camino friends and celebrate. And I said, oh no, I'm on my own, I don't want to celebrate, I'll be quite happy just to lie down and rest. So that was the first night. Then the next day I transferred to the albergue Seminario Menor on the hill. It's absolutely massive, but for 15 euros a night you get your own room, which I thought that was fantastic, and your own electricity charging point, your own little shelf where you can put your glasses. Oh, it was so lovely. The previous time I'd stayed in an albergue like that, everyone left their doors open because you're on the Camino, you're used to sleeping in dormitories. Seminario Menor, everyone closes their doors, so the Camino really is over. Something else that hits you when you arrive in Santiago that I wasn't ready for is, if you remember Chuck's good advice that you never say goodbye to people on the Camino because you might see them in 10 minutes or 2 days, you never know. When you take off your rucksack and arrive in Santiago, you leave the Camino and you realise all those people that you've met and thought you might bump into again, well, you're unlikely to. You might bump into them, I suppose, going around Santiago, but you realise you've left the Camino, you're not going to see those people anymore. Also, each day on the Camino is a new day. If you had a bad day the day before, you've always got another day, it's all new, another chance to have a better experience. When you leave the Camino, that's your Camino finished, you know, it's not going to get any better, you're not going to discover any new things. So when you leave the Camino, you really do have this feeling that it's all ended. So here I am in Santiago. I stood outside the cathedral like everyone else does. I queued up to get my certificate. There are two museums there. There's the cathedral has a museum, and there's a sort of a Galician cultural people's museum. They're okay, they're worth going round. I did go round on the Puffing Billy road train, which takes you on a tour of Santiago. I must admit, on the day I went, the tour guide sounded a bit bored, and I can't blame her, because there isn't really much to see, you know, there's the occasional church. I only went on it because After walking 800 kilometers, I thought the idea of going somewhere without moving your legs, I thought this was a great revelation, but I can't really recommend the land train. And the cathedral at Santiago is sort of okay. Remember, if you've been to Burgos, Leon or Astorga, they're all quite good cathedrals, and when you get to Santiago, it's sort of just okay, but you know, it's worth going round. Some people get the bus from Santiago to Finisterre. I don't think there's a public bus service, but there are private bus companies that run sort of excursions out for the day. You have to be up quite early and at a certain bus stop at a certain time to go. I went, rather than do that on the bus, I went to A Coruña on the train. It's quite easy to do, much more regular service, and A Coruña has some things that are worth going to see. It has a science centre, a planetarium. It's got an ancient Roman tower, a tower lighthouse, which is sort of half been restored. And also, it is by the sea, so it's a bit like going to Finisterre, but only on the train. I think it's quite a good thing to do, the Camino. I don't know if I'll do it again soon, but it's not a holiday. It is a bit of a struggle sometimes, but I'm glad I've done it. And if you remember, for 30 days, I've got quite a good memory of all the things that have happened to me in everyday life. Can you remember what you did the day before? Have you done anything extraordinary? So even though it may not be a holiday, pretty much for every day I can remember something about it and something that happened. So that was my Camino. You'll be glad to know it's all over now. So well done me for doing that. Well done you for watching all this time. I'm going to make some more Camino videos because I've still got some more stories to tell, which you'll be disappointed to hear. But also I'm going to do other videos as well, because it's nearly 6 months since I finished the Camino. So I can't do that. I can't make videos about the Camino forever, can I? So I've got some more ideas. So I hope you're going to watch those as well. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.